Something is happening in Africa. People are calling it the Arab Spring. It may not be the Arab Spring, but definitely a wind of change is blowing in Africa. And people are now asking, who next? In the words of James Brown, the famous singer who sang during the American Civil Rights Movement, freedom train is coming. Can't you hear the whistle blowing? So for those who are asking, who is next? The whistle is blowing for Yoweri Kaguta Museveni. Can't he hear the whistle blowing? Change is coming to DRC, Joseph Kabila. Things are happening in Cameroon. Things are happening in Togo. Not long after those, perhaps together with those, there may be the unsellable Paul Kagame, Nkurunziza of Burundi, and many others. But the most important question is not who is following. The more important question would be, what are the conditions that lead to this kind of thing? It is simple. Those in Africa who don't read the times, those in Africa who don't realize that the contradictions inherent in Africa must be resolved, will be swept away by the wind of change. The contradiction of a continent that has resources, but a continent that produces the poorest people in the world, a continent that can feed the world, yet a continent where people go to bed hungry, a continent from where we have beggars begging across the world for food, for aid, yet we have resources to feed the world. These contradictions must be resolved. The contradiction of a continent with the highest number of young people, yet a continent that has people who are not employed, and it is these unemployed masses of youth that are feeding the revolutions in Africa. It is these people who are jobless, an army of people who would otherwise be productive in any country, that will lead to the removal of these dictators. The contradiction in Africa, where we have a very youthful population, fairly well educated, informed, with a more free media, and yet where African leaders want to lead in the way our grandfathers led us many years ago. These are the contradictions that must be resolved. People are therefore talking about a third liberation. After the first liberation that saw us get independence in the 1960s, which independence was sabotaged, stillborn, which informed the literature of the 1960s and the 1970s, the literature of disillusionment, Aikweyama, Gogewa Thiongo, Chinua Achebe. Anybody who read these books in the 70s saw the disillusionment in the literature, in their writing. Then came the liberation that was called the second liberation in the 1990s, aided by what was happening in the world. The collapse of the Berlin Wall made the West now open eyes and see the Mobutus of this continent, see the dictators of Africa, and for once insist on good governance and respect for human rights. This helped African countries to come up with the second liberation, multi-party democracy, and some dictators actually failed. Kamuzu Banda, Kenneth Kaunda, and many others. However, a third liberation seems necessary because the West has again gone to bed with dictators in Africa, and the reasons are not difficult to see. When they insisted on good governance and respect for human rights, China came into Africa, it didn't ask questions, and is doing wonderful business with Africa. The West will want to have a share of this business, and therefore, they are now beginning to support dictators in Africa. The West has also gone slow on their support for democracy in Africa because they have said, wait a minute, something seems to be happening in Africa. Youthful population, more educated, and questioning the presence of the West in Africa, the presence of China in Africa, and that it may not be in the interest of the West for an enlightened Africa, which enlightenment will be brought by democracy in Africa. So they are checking on democracy in Africa because they know, for example, that Kenyans are going to question why we should import second-hand clothes from America to kill our industry, why we should demean ourselves by importing second-hand clothes that would even include second-hand underwear. So the West is beginning to be a little apprehensive about democracy in Africa. Now, the best lesson we can learn from what is happening in Africa today, other than the fact that the conditions obtaining, if you allow them to obtain, you as a dictator will go. The best lesson we should learn from Africa and we should apply across the world and across sectors is that in the 21st century, going forward, if you are given a responsibility, even a small man as a principal of a school, if you operate within the structures, if you operate within the provided rules and regulations, you'll do your job well, you'll enjoy your job, and you'll retire. If you are a cabinet secretary, you'll do your job well if you respect. If you are head of an organization or an institution, especially a public one, just do the thing that you are required to do within the stipulated regulations. If you are a president of a country, obey the constitution of your country. Do things according to the provisions. Allow for free, fair, credible elections. And if you win in a free and fair, credible election, you'll enjoy your presidency. For those who do not listen to this and think they can win elections by manipulating those elections, my word to them is this: it will be very difficult for you to enjoy your presidency. But if you win free, square, you can even take 30 days leave, leave your deputy, go away, come back to your country, and nothing will have gone wrong because you won clean and you are going to lead peacefully and you enjoy your presidency. What lesson do we have for Kenya? For my country, I have this to say. I wish our leaders, President Uhuru Kenyatta, Prime Minister Raila Odinga, I wish our leaders could resolve the issues that arise out of our elections of 2017. The reason why I want this election to be put behind us is because if we don't resolve and the opposition continues agitating for change, including wanting a fresh election, then the government might be forced to undertake measures that one would see as draconian. Government could get into the temptation of being a little autocratic. And this would then put Kenya and lump Kenya together with the countries that are a sure bet for the changes that are going on in Africa. The changes that we don't want to see, where people are sort of overturned, where governments are sent home midterm. We want peace in this country, and I believe that peace is possible if we resolve the issues arising out of our elections of 2017 so that government operates clean without having to step down, without having to crack down, without having to arrest people, without having to do all those things that it might be forced to do in order to deal with an opposition that will be insisting that we have to bring this election to closure by having another election.